everybody. Welcome to the D-Pad. I'm Rick, and this is Picross Princess Pring. And as you can see, we have actually got a few more of these puzzles cleared, because the first 40 puzzles in Mega Picross are actually the same 40 puzzles as in the regular version, just in a new order for whatever reason. The last 5 I didn't actually do, and the reason for that is these are actually different, and we're going to take a look at these today. You may have also noticed that I'm the only one in the intro, because I wanted to take a minute and oh, let me move my mouse. It's literally in the way where I can't see some of the screen here. Okay, there we go. I wanted to take a minute, and maybe more than a minute, presumably more than a minute, and just kind of go through a little pseudo interview myself, I guess, and just kind of explore some of the thoughts that I've had, and the thoughts that, you know, I've asked a lot from other people over the last 2 weeks, I guess, right? And, you know, I'd already been kind of planning on doing some kind of video myself for this, but I think it was Sarah who was saying, like, you know, you could probably interview yourself, right? Like, do the same kind of questions that you've been asking other people. Like, why not answer them yourself? Which I was like, yeah, I think that's exactly the right way to try that. So I'll do the best I can. Obviously, it's going to be even harder than it was before, given I was able to kind of detach a little bit while people were talking in order to get the puzzle done, and that's not really an option here. I'm going to be both doing all of the talking and doing all of the puzzle solving at once, but I've only got 5 puzzles to solve, and thankfully, despite these 20x15s being 20x15s, they're generally easier than some of the smaller ones, just because the structures that they're building wind up being a little bit more simplistic, I guess. A little bit, like, for this one, this is Hyrule Castle, and it's a lot like it's a big triangle of stuff, you know? Which is a great way to think about the series as a whole. But, yeah, so just kind of thinking back, like, so for me, my first Zelda experience was I played the original Legend of Zelda on the NES way back when I was a kid. My grandmother had an NES in her bedroom, and I would basically just hang out there whenever, because, like, so the adults would be hanging out downstairs, I'd be upstairs, me and either my sister or one of my cousins or somebody would just, like, we'd all be hanging out upstairs playing video games, which was a grand old time. But yeah, it was, I would say on an average day, I was either playing The Legend of Zelda or I was playing Dragon Warrior. I didn't have Final Fantasy. I didn't even realize what I was missing out on with Final Fantasy at the time, though I think I also may not have necessarily, like, gotten it exactly, because when I did... oh, that was a daring move. I shouldn't... Oh, no, that's because these connect as the 9. I never actually beat the original Zelda as a kid. I don't think I beat it until I was in, like, high school or something, just because I hadn't really gone back to it. Like, I didn't really have 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I didn't really have, like, a real drive to go back and, like, oh man, I gotta finish the fight kind of deal. But I had gone back and done, like, Dragon Warrior and stuff. Even though Dragon Warrior, I also didn't beat as a kid. I just, like, I came back to it. That one I came back to much quicker for some reason. I don't know why. Here we go. Maybe this will be a short episode. Who knows? It's funny. I was actually originally going to do... So Meg was a very last second... Like, I was trying to make it work, but her schedule was really busy and my schedule was really busy. And I'm like, all right, we'll do the best we can. My original thought was I was going to do the first puzzle to explain how Mega Picross works and then just jump directly to these, possibly with some movie magic to edit out the other 39 puzzles that would have come before. But... yeah, so I really grew up with the original Legend of Zelda, though it was a while before I played any of the others. So it's funny, we had an NES in the house. It was my dad bought it for himself. You know, it would, I don't know if they bought it before I was born, because I was born in '87, and the NES in the States, I want to say, was 1985. So it's possible that they bought it for themselves before I was even born. I'm not sure on that. We had a dog growing up, and that dog was bought just before I was born too. So, good old Max. 3, 1, 3, 1. Okay, cool. We've got a lot we can actually do here. But yeah, when I wanted to play, so I didn't have a Super Nintendo for a while either. We eventually got one for the daycare that my mom ran, but like we didn't have like A Link to the Past, for example. We didn't have that. So I had to go to a friend's house to play it, and you know, when you're young, you act up and you're kind of dumb about dumb things sometimes. So like I certainly wouldn't hold it against the guy now, but I remember somehow, I don't know why this is such a distinct memory for me, but he got into a fight with me, not like a physical one, but like into a yelling match because he thought that I broke his Super Nintendo because we went to turn it on and the game didn't turn on. And I don't know if anyone out there has ever owned a Super Nintendo, but similar to the NES, every once in a while you just have to like jiggle it and try it again. Like it doesn't always work on the first go. That's just kind of how video games work. But he was not hearing it, and he was super pissed. I think he was like, you should just go, like that kind of a day. And I was like, all right, bye. Like, which I don't know. There were problems with that later on, but 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. So yeah, I grew up with the original NES one. I didn't have A Link to the Past. I didn't have The Adventure of Link. The next Zelda game I got was Link's Awakening, and maybe it's because like Link's Awakening really is kind of a solid analog to the original game. Like they feel very similar. I think Link's Awakening feels more like the original game than basically any of the ones that came after. Like they've just got it's top-down adventure, you know, mysterious land, and you know, basic map, 8 dungeons, that kind of thing. Like it all sort of just, you know, pieced itself together in a very similar way. There we go. And oh damn it, that still can work there. Shit. 2, 1, 1, 2. There we go. Okay. But yeah, so I don't know if it was because I don't know if it was because that was the first, you know, game that I got, like the first Zelda game that I got after, you know, my time playing the original or what, but I fell in love with it immediately. I had no real like appreciation for, you know, not like I didn't have an appreciation for like the tone, but I don't think I really got it in like a way where I could explain what I felt playing that game. Like, you know what I mean? You can experience something and know that what you're experiencing is something like powerful and big, but you can't really like verbalize what that experience is. Like you couldn't describe to someone how it made you feel because it's just like man, it's just, I don't know. It was weird and confusing and I liked it. Like that's just kind of where you wind up with it. 1, 2, 3. Oh, nice. This is actually one we can clear out really well. But yeah, so like I really, really loved that game. It was probably the first game that it may have been the first game that I owned that belonged to. Whoops, I was trying to hit B for that. The first game that I owned that fully belonged to me and wasn't like, oh, I'm technically borrowing it from whatever. That like I really, really obsessed over. Like I fell hard for, I think at that point I was like hooked on the whole series, which, you know, was only 4 games strong at the time, but it quickly kind of grew from there and spiraled and not spiraled. It like, I don't know. It resonated really strongly with me though. And I found myself really looking forward to the next game. And I think the next game that came out after that. So I got the DX version. I don't know how the hell I must have put up one hell of a fight or absolutely conned the shit out of my parents in order to justify buying Link's Awakening DX, because it, if I was a parent right now and I had done a little bit of research to look into this game. Now obviously at the time in like the mid 90s wasn't always very easy to find that kind of information to go like, oh hey, what is this game? But nowadays it would be very easy to look it up and go like, is this the same game just in color? Like what? No, we're not doing that. Like it would have been incredibly easy nowadays to go like, no, that's not happening. But I had it. I don't know how I had it, but I liked that one a lot. I remember thinking that the color dungeon was super cool. I don't know, like that was the one that I always reached for to play whenever like, because I had both the versions. I think at the time, and I would be willing to bet this is the case for like a lot of kids. It's just like if it's newer, it's just automatically cooler. And so I was like, nah, man, I'm gonna do I want the Game Boy Color one, because the Game Boy Color is so cool, and like that kind of mentality with it, and there we go. And yeah, so like, but I think, again, I don't think I quite like really appreciated everything that game had to offer, especially the original version. Nowadays, I will swear by the original Game Boy version, arguably more so than the color version, because just the tone that game carries in that monochrome, in that like old, like the technology of the Game Boy always felt just it's weird because it was so cutting edge in and of itself. Like, I obviously don't have the perspective of living through the 80s to know this stuff for myself, but when I got it, my memories of it were in the early 90s, and, well, I guess the Game Boy itself was, 89, so it was barely in the 80s itself, but my memories of the Game Boy were from the 90s, and it always felt like a piece of the 80s in terms of technology, even though it was this brand new thing that absolutely, like, we covered that in the Tiger Electronics video. Like, this was new stuff and very important stuff that Nintendo had pulled off with the Game Boy, and it just completely just decimated Tiger Electronics, who was really trying to just compete with the old Game & Watch, and they did fine, but as soon as the Game Boy came out, and it was like, here's a modular version of this, and it is infinitely more customizable of an experience. It was just like, oh, well, I guess this game is over then. There's no fighting that. Like, whoops. I'm getting a little off track, I guess. So it always felt a little bit outdated, and like, if you're familiar with, this is going to seem like a real tangent, but if you're familiar with Vaporwave in any capacity, I think the appeal that Link's Awakening has, especially on the Game Boy, is very similar to, I don't even know if I could say that Vaporwave is like appealing, but sort of it's like a curiosity, like it piques your interest, and kind of like you just sort of like look at it sideways, and it's like a work of art, like an abstract art piece that you're trying to understand, and you don't know if you can. So you just kind of stare at it for a while, and you hope that, like, maybe if I just look at it long enough, my brain will catch up and realize what it is that I'm even, like, looking at. And I think, to an extent, the Game Boy had that a little bit, but especially Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, there's something about it that makes it feel distant, even when it's close. Which, in my opinion, is kind of like one of the main thrusts of like Vaporwave, which is why I made that comparison. Is like, it's nostalgic, but in like a wistful sort of way, which I guess is like the whole, like, that's what nostalgia is. It's an almost painful longing for the past, I guess. I'm sure there's a more, accurate technical definition of it, but I, like, in layman's terms, that's kind of what it comes down to. The idea of nostalgia was historically not like a good thing. It was almost more like homesickness, or something along those lines, like very similar, where you just, like, it's a yearning for that, but it also, I don't know, it's when I play Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy, it's that sort of a feeling. And it's not like, oh, I'm sad that I'm not a kid anymore. It's just sort of like, because you're playing in this like alien sort of world. Like everything is just off enough. And you're just kind of figuring things out as you go. There we go. And it's just like this mystery. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling a lot, and I'm sure it's partly because my attention is divided. But that was always like really just a cool piece of that game to me. Is like it benefited from the tech being kind of not outdated. Pastoral maybe, like the Game Boy kind of immediately dates itself, and so but it like fits with that really nicely, I think. And like, so that's what I mean is I could talk about that game for hours and hours, and I have. If you've watched this channel, it doesn't take much to get me talking about Link's Awakening. And there we go. It had like a pretty strong impact on me. Like it really got me to appreciate. Like I think that's honestly how I learned to appreciate games, was like not just as like, hey, this is fun, but like, oh wow, this is like really interesting. I think that would be where that kind of came from in me. And I don't even know where I'd be or what my thoughts on games would be at all, or if I'd even be someone who plays video games if it weren't for that game. I don't think I would have had that curiosity that Link's Awakening kind of imparts, So there's that. And then I wound up at some point, we wound up with an N64, and we had Ocarina of Time, and I played that game to absolute death, and that one was kind of interesting just because it was the first, I think, 3D game that I'd really had that, and I mean, it sounds like most of the team had a similar experience where it's like it's the first kind of 3D game that a lot of us had and like got really invested in, and something about, I think it was honestly the 1-2 punch of Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64 that did it for a lot of people. Like not to downplay, the PlayStation or the Sega Saturn or the Dreamcast or anything. Well, I guess the Dreamcast came a few years after the N64, but the transition to 3D really like blew a lot of people away, but like there was a lot of crap too. Like you got your Bubsy 3Ds and stuff, and like those were not very good experiences. So when you get a game like Ocarina of Time, it's hard to believe that game exists even while you're playing it. Like you're just kind of mesmerized by like, holy shit, this is so cool. And that's what it was for me. I was like, this is incredible. I had no idea that a game like that could exist. So it was like this really fascinating kind of ride with that. But I don't think it was like the same level of like curiosity that I had with Link's Awakening. At that, like by the time that came out, and then when Majora's Mask came out, I was 12, I think, 12 years old. And by then I was a lot more, I paid a lot more attention to like games and like what was coming out and all of that stuff. So like it was a lot, like I have a lot firmer of a memory of like what was going on at the time for 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 for some of those. But like those earlier games I feel like were really like formative to what I'm interested in now and what really spoke to me back then. As far as like favorite games, that gets a bit trickier. Like I think so it's tough because you have to like qualify it sort of, right? I can't just say like, oh well, my favorite game is Link's Awakening because all those reasons that I said before. It's more like, is that my favorite because it was so impactful, or is it just actually my favorite? Or like, am I gauging it too strongly on my thoughts and like the feelings it evoked as compared to it being my favorite of those games? Like there's kind of a delicate dance there. But like, so I think I could name my top 3 pretty easily. My top 3 would be A Link to the Past, in no particular order. A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and The Wind Waker. I think those would be my my top 3. And I think I would say I guess so. I think the reason why I kind of hedge my bets a little bit with that is I go, all right, I don't want to judge it too much on my personal blah, 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 but like, this isn't what is the best game, it's what is my favorite game. So I think if I had to say what my favorite one is, it would probably be Link's Awakening. I think A Link to the Past may be the best of those games and may very well be the best Zelda game. I've gone on long diatribes and things about like, about whether or not Breath of the Wild is not even just a good Zelda game, but just like, is it really a Zelda game, or is it a different? Not like, oh, it's not really Zelda, but like more, it doesn't feel the same as a Zelda game, and does that kind of change the perception of it as a result? But like, that's not really, I don't think that's really necessarily super important for this. There we go. So yeah, I guess I would go with those 3. I think The Wind Waker is the next closest, both in terms of, I think that might be my second favorite, and it might also be what I think is the second best. Yeah, I think that's how I would go with that. Just because like it merges together so many different ideas on top of being the first real like open-ended Zelda game. It, like, not in full, not to the level of Breath of the Wild or even A Link Between Worlds, but you do have the entire Great Sea to explore kind of at your leisure. And I just think that I just thought that it was like really cool how they did that. They gave you so much freedom right up front, and then it's like, all right, go, just have a blast, have a good time, go explore, find stuff. It was the reason why I was so excited in Paper Mario: The Origami King. There's a segment of the game where you can hop on a boat and go travel. It's not nearly as extensive by any stretch, but like, you do get to kind of go and explore this like open, like oceany kind of zone. I was hoping maybe it'd be a little bit more. Like it felt like a tiny bit of a tease, or it was like, ooh, hey, check this awesome thing out, and then they went, oh, it's actually not that big. It's like, all right, fine. But it was still, I thought it was an awesome surprise though. And I think I feel like they kind of were leaning into that a bit. Like they know that that people would have that kind of reaction to it. Also, quick note on the Mega Picross thing. I don't know if the game actually, I think the game kind of implied without stating it, but you absolutely have to have at least one square in both columns in order for it to count as a mega square, so you can make little logical assumptions that do things like that. Also a fun one, the 2 is always 2 squares across, just in a flat thing like this. So it could be this, but it could also be this. Either way, this guy gets to go away. So fun little bit of logic to help us on our way there. So yeah, if I had to think of what my favorite Zelda Let's Play we've ever done is, that gets difficult. That's such, and I know that I kind of put people on the spot with that, with the question when I was interviewing them, and it really is a difficult thing to choose, because you're kind of like scanning through everything in your head and trying to remember, like, oh, how did this go and how did this go, and like which did I have the most fun with, and what was good and what was not so good, and And like I literally have a list in front of me right now, and I even now just looking at it, I'm like, oh my god, I don't even know how I could begin to decide what I would say was like the best series that we did. So I don't know. I think I would say that an early candidate would probably be Wind Waker, just from like we got Ben, we got like I feel like we kind of settled into a style that has remained relatively consistent since then. I don't know, we just sort of like found a rhythm and we're like, ooh, okay, this works. And in a lot of ways we kind of stuck with that, and it seems to have really worked out well, and we've made about 1 million trillion games and series on various games at this point, all using that same kind of, I don't know, feeling to it, I guess. But yeah, Wind Waker was really good. Battle Quest was obviously a really memorable experience. That night was absolutely crazy. And we were all so absolutely exhausted by the end of it. And it like I wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was so weird of a like we had done not like a ton of games. We had done a handful, and we kind of had an expectation of what kind of work would go into producing one of those. And then we did that, and it was like we were there for hours trying to get through like a few levels. Like it was a lot. And I mean, we got through it, and it was eventually like one of our, one of the series that like it seems like everybody kind of looks back on now and is like, that was fun. It was hard at the time, but it was a great memory to make. I thought A Link Between Worlds was really good. Majora's Mask had the Super Bowl of Let's Plays. What else? We finally got around to doing Skyward Sword after a really, really long time leaving that be. There we go. So that was a nice thing to kind of come back to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ah, damn it! All right. CJ's speedrun of Link's Awakening, or Speed Fun as we're now kind of going with, since they were definitely not like rigorous speedrun experiences by any stretch. So that was a really good time. Holy cow, this one's gonna be weird. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. I'm actually amazed that I'm able to ramble on with any level of coherency during all of this. There we go. Let's see. I'm like looking. I feel like the end of the original Legendary Let's Play was like not uneventful, but it seems like we were kind of like done with it at that point. Like we were ready to kind of move on and get into other stuff. So I feel like we did maybe rush a little bit at the end. We wanted to get it done basically by the end of that year, and we really pushed, and then we did. I don't know if it was like bad that we pushed it that hard necessarily. I don't know how obvious it was that we were like really pushing it through. Oh man, that doesn't help either. Jeez. I don't know how obvious it was that we were really like forcing it through there to try to get it done. It might be super obvious, especially now that I've said it. It could be like, oh my god, it stands out so much now. But those last couple of games are definitely a bit blurrier to me, just as a result of like we were pushing so hard to get them done that we didn't really like take like a casual stance to it at all. We were like ready. We were really like in there. Holy cow, this one's. I mean, hey, it is the last one, but like, geez, this is a lot right now. Is there like nothing that I have to use as like a basis for an assumption here? Oh, here we go. There it is. I missed these. Okay, now we're on track. This is much better. But yeah, so then we did. So after that, we did Hyrule Warriors, which was fun. I don't know if it was necessarily like I don't know that I would say it was a super memorable Let's Play. Like there was not, I don't know if there was that there was much that really stood out as like this was like one of the all-time moments for the channel kinds of thing. But it was still a fun game, and it was a neat, like, new sort of take on all of that. Like we hadn't really seen a game do that with another. I mean, I don't know if I think that was the first one that those guys had done with a different franchise, like not Nintendo, but the other. Is it Koei Tecmo that does those games? I think it is. I don't remember though. But whoops, there we go. But yeah, it was something so like fresh and new and weird that I think it really grabbed our attention. It did kind of get old after a while. It's one of those games that is fun to play, but it's not necessarily great as Let's Play material, because it does kind of start to drag after a while. It does start to feel a little repetitive, and it does start to feel like you're kind of grinding a lot after a while just to keep up. Which, I mean, that's true whether you're doing a Let's Play of it or not. That's just kind of the nature of how that game works, I guess. But it's more apparent when you're trying to create, like, you know, funny content, and you're like, oh, good, we're gonna go and grind again for, we gotta do a battle so we don't get our asses kicked over here. This will be good. But it was still a fun time. Four Swords was obviously a very similar to Battle Quest kind of scenario. Like, it was just this ridiculous mess of a recording series. It wasn't really I think it was in 2 sessions. Four Swords was in 1 session. Four Swords Adventures was in 2 sessions, I believe. I may be wrong on that, but I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 there. But it was still like there's an obvious, you can tell that there's like a tonal shift in both of those series by the end, where we're all like audibly exhausted and ready for it to be over, and we're just trying so hard to just find the end of the Blue Maiden, or try to find the end of that one level in Four Swords where we had to like clash swords to light a torch with a spark, and like all of this stuff that was just driving us mental in the moment. But it's fun to look back on and just be kind of like, oh yeah, wow, that was totally a thing, and it was very weird, and I can't believe we got through that without killing each other, because there was very much a risk of that at various points. So here we go, finding out more clues as we go. After that, let's see, we had Minish Cap, which was our last, like, I think that was our last weekday series, and then we had moved into, what was it, A New Day? Dawn of a New Day, which was literally just, you know, whenever there's new stuff, we'll play it. And at the time, we did Ocarina of Time 3D, not because it was new, but because Majora's Mask 3D was coming out, and we were like, oh, this could be a cool way to, like, you know, we'll play Ocarina. And we had an assumption for when Majora's Mask was going to come out, because I think it was like the 20th anniversary or something like that. Not even 20th. It was the 15th, I think. 15th anniversary maybe of the game coming out. And we're like, oh, that makes sense. They'll do it then. Like, why wouldn't they? And so we played Ocarina of Time, assuming that we were going to have like a little bit of a break before Majora comes out. And then they announced Majora's Mask and basically give it, like, and it'll be released in, like, a month. And we're like, oh, God. Oh, no. That's going to be a problem. And it very quickly was. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, okay, here we go. I forget how we even handled that. I mean, just looking at it right now on our list, there was clearly an overlap between them. We were playing both games at the same time, it looks like, which is bad. Like, not just confusing for people watching, but it's certainly harder to get into the tone of a game if you're playing 2 different games that are built in the same engine, and one is built as a partial sequel to the other. Like, it's a really easy way to, like, get lost in, you know, in all of that. Not like we don't know the game well enough to, like, you know, like we're not getting lost in the plot in the sense that like we don't know what's happening, we don't know who characters are, because we all, you know that game pretty well, but more just like it's harder to stay focused on what the current task is. It's harder to kind of separate them in your mind after a while. You just get kind of used to like, oh yeah, this is we're playing Ocarina of Time, and we're gonna go find the Happy Mask salesman to. Wait a minute, is that this? No, hang on. We don't need this salesman. He's over there, and we don't need him for that. Like after a while, it starts to get a little bit convoluted. And it was also like from a mechanical YouTube-y sort of sense, we were making two very similar series that not contradicted each other, but like complemented each other weirdly. I don't know. Out of all the new stuff, I really loved Cadence of Hyrule, and I really loved honestly, Ripe and Dinkle's Balloon Trip of Love was a shockingly enjoyable experience. I think I'd say the same for the Satellaview Zelda games as well. Those were actually all really interesting and neat. I think the A Link to the Past one was probably the best one, but all three of them were kind of weirdly charming. I thought the randomizers were a lot of fun too. Those were a neat take on things. I'm still waiting for them to finish the Majora's Mask randomizer. So you know, this is ending pretty immediately, but I don't think I would be opposed to doing more Zelda randomizers in the future, just as like random stream content. In particular, I really want to do Majora's Mask and Link's Awakening, especially. I know there's a Link's Awakening randomizer, and I haven't touched it yet, and I really want to do that. Part of me was like, oh, I'll save it for a special moments kind of thing, but it was like, I should just do it. I should stop waiting and just get on it. So, but yeah, that is. Let's hop out of here and. Hang on one second. There we go. I have had a lot of fun doing this over the last 7 years. It's really weird to be at the end of it. It's really weird to kind of see the curtain come down and be like, whoa, it's actually like over. Like the first time around, it wasn't quite the same. I think because we had never done something like the scope of that was like a year and a half. And that was a big project, but it's also like, all right, that was cool. That was a cool thing to do. And like, yeah, maybe we'll do some other things. And like, we always kind of had an idea for A Terrible Fate kicking around, something along these lines. I don't know, like at what point the exact idea crystallized, but the idea had been there for a while. And I don't know. I think it's so much more. It's now been 7 years, and it's such a different feeling being at the end of this. So I just have to say thank you to everyone who's been a part of this from the beginning, or if you just joined us this past week. And thank you to anyone who's coming to this later and wondering, you know, the milestones of this journey, I guess. We do have one more thing to do here. And we'll get to that next time.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Check it out. You got the with the and the with the.
And time away from your friends and time being told that you're not very good and all this stuff, and Bill would have given up. But you did the same for YouTube, right? You were like, these guys are so much fun. Like, this looks like such a fun way to make a living. Making a living playing video games. This is amazing.
Right?
You don't make a living playing video games.
Oh, God, no.
You make some change editing videos forever.